Notre Dame fans, you asked, and I am here to answer the first ever A to Z Notre Dame mailbag. Let's talk Kingston Vasa, the Georgia Bulldogs, the Penn State Nittany Lions, the 2025 offensive line, and a whole lot more here next. Ryan Roberts here from A to Z Sports, breaking down everything Notre Dame football. Wanted to give you all an opportunity to get into the conversation. This thread was posted at Rise and Draft on Twitter, which of course is my handle. Wanted to bring a weekly mailbag to the conversation for everyone out there that is not on Twitter, or I guess X now. You can drop your questions right down below on this video in the comment section. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you comment, and if you do both, I will make sure for the next mailbag that your question will get carried over to the next week. So make sure to comment below. Let's get into some of these great questions, and thank you all to everybody that participated in this mailbag. Hope that this is super beneficial. I want to start out with Josh. Started out by asking, what do you think the starting offensive line will be in the 2025 season? Then we had a follow-up by P.I. Staker, who also said, what are your thoughts about Anthony Knapp potentially moving inside next year? He had his struggles at offensive tackle, but also had some positives throughout the course of the season. Can Charles Jagasaw make a real push, or is he a better guard? Gerby Lambert has the size and feet to be a natural left tackle. So 2025 offensive line. I am certain of 3 offensive line positions now, and I'm pretty close to certain on 5 players that I project as being the starting 5. The 3 that I know will be the starters. Of course, this is revolves around injury, potential comebacks, and rehab and all those types of things. But if healthy in the full offensive line room, I expect Ashton Craig to be the starting center. I expect Billy Schroff to be the starting left guard, and I expect Emil Wagner to be the starting right tackle. Now, Ashton Craig obviously is injured, and who knows exactly when the timeline will be. He spoke a little bit about it in media availability, and it sounds like he thinks that he'll be back for the summer and then into the fall. So if he's back and at full health, I think Ashton Craig will be at center, Billy Schroff at left guard, Emil Wagner at right tackle. Now, the other 2 spots, I believe, this is my early guess, that it will be Charles Jagasaw and it will be Anthony Knapp at the other 2 starting offensive line positions. The biggest question, though, is who plays where. Anthony Knapp has a full year of starting experience at left tackle. I do think Charles Jagasaw projects better at left tackle than Anthony Knapp does, but will that experience outweigh the potential of a Charles Jagasaw? Regardless, I do think that those 2 players have the inside track to start. Now, it could be Charles Jagasaw at right guard. It could be Anthony Knapp moving into right guard and Charles Jagasaw at left tackle. Not really sure positionally which of those players will fall into those 2 open spots, but I will predict Charles Jagasaw, Billy Schroff, Ashton Craig, right guard. For now, I'll say Anthony Knapp, and then I'll say Emil Wagner at right tackle. This is nothing against Gerby Lambert. I just think that there's obviously guys with more starting experience, and it doesn't always mean anything because we've seen guys take year 1 to year 2 massive jumps. And I would actually be okay with, if you want to have a battle inside at guard or at left tackle with Gerby Lambert in the conversation, I would be totally okay with it. But for now, I'm going to defer to a couple guys that I've seen just a little bit more, and I'm going to say Gerby Lambert's breakout doesn't happen until his 3rd year on campus, which would be the season of the 2026 season. Ryan Keeler on Twitter, what do you think is the plan for quarterback next season? Well, we've had a lot of conversation about that. There's been some rumors about transfer portal candidates at quarterback, but we know now that, because people just keep telling us the same thing over and over again, Notre Dame has a quarterback room now going into the 2025 season that they are going to be happy with. There's going to be a competition. Steve Angeli, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchey. How I think it works out is one of the 2 younger guys eventually wins that starting spot. I think that I would say that CJ Carr has the best chance, but I'm not counting out Kenny Minchey. I think Kenny Minchey is very talented, so I'm just excited to see which one of those young guns ultimately does win that starting spot. We now have Brendan McGuire, who says, how soon will this playoff success affect recruiting? Will this get us in the game or over the hump with some elite players in the 2026 class? I think you're going to see immediate payback for the success you're having on the field. I think especially after you beat Georgia, I think that that's going to send a little bit of shockwaves, at least to some of the kids in the southeastern part of the United States. They're going to start to see that Notre Dame is a unique place, and we always know that. But now that they're competing with the big boys, I do think that could definitely help in 2026. So I think that sends some shockwaves. If Notre Dame ends the season with a win over Penn State and potentially a national championship, then I think that really kicks the door down. But I think Georgia does have a lot of stay power with a lot of recruits out there. And I think that will have a very positive impact for 2026 and beyond. We had a question from NoopLife007 on Twitter who says, which of the young defensive linemen step up and play a significant role next season? I'm not going to include Bryce Young because I think that's the easy candidate, right? Obviously he's in the rotation, mostly a pass rusher at this point, but I think you can expect him to take a massive step from freshman to sophomore year. I'm going to say one guy, actually I'm going to give you two, one interior and one edge rusher. I'm going to go with Logan Thomas at the Viper position. We know that Jordan Botelho's coming back. We know Boubacar Traore should be on the mend. But both guys coming back from injury, I think there's going to be opportunities at Viper, or at least a pass rush downs. I think we're going to see more and more of Logan Thomas, the bendy outside track rusher, who I think has a tremendous amount of upside. And then my interior defensive line breakout, who I thought would get a little bit more run this year as a sophomore, I think Armel Mukam, year 3, could take a nice step. And not necessarily predicting him to be the number 1 interior defensive lineman in 2025, but I think he's going to play a lot of reps in 2025. We're going to start to see that upside really hit the table. I'm really excited about the future for Armel Mukam. We had a question from Rocket25. It says, will Keydron Young move into running back 3 next year? Well, it all depends, I think, on whether Jadarian Price comes back. Is he a transfer candidate after the season? Does he go to the NFL draft? Does he return in 2025? We don't really have indications on that. But I will say that I expect to see a lot more of Keydron Young because he's only played in a couple games, and obviously to preserve that red shirt, I think we're going to see a lot more. But as of now, if Jadarian Price comes back, I'm going to say that Aeneas Williams keeps going forward. And I think there's a little bit of a split share as that running back 3. So I think Keydron takes a step, but I think that Aeneas Williams has done a lot of great things as a true freshman, so he's going to be hard to beat out for the full-time number 3 role in 2025 if Jadarian Price comes back. We had Joseph Phillip who says, thank you for doing this. I'm Joe from Pennsylvania. Nice to meet you, Joe. The question I need to ask is, have you heard any more rumors about defensive tackles in the transfer portal? So have covered this a little bit. I'll say this, and this is about much as I can say right now. Notre Dame, from what I've been able to gather, feels pretty confident where they are at defensive tackle. I've been talked to a couple different sources. This isn't directly from Notre Dame, but I was told by somebody that Notre Dame already has kind of their guys lined up. I think that I'm very confident about one in particular, and I have reported about him over the last week at A to Z Sports as well. So I'm not going to necessarily put his name out there because I've talked about a few defensive tackles, but I think that if you just kind of read around, read between the lines a little bit and just read the stories carefully, I think you can kind of deduce which guy I feel pretty good about. So I think Notre Dame is going to do a good job at transfer portal at defensive tackle. We just need to be a little bit patient as of right now. We got Lou Holtz Burner. Fantastic. So that's a screen name on X. Who are your favorite offensive and defensive players to start as freshmen next year? I think there's going to be opportunity in the secondary a little bit at nickel and safety. I could see a guy like a Dallas Golden potentially playing a lot in the nickel as a freshman. I could see Jadon Blair at safety play a decent amount as a true freshman. Those are the two guys on defense that kind of really pop out immediately to me. On the offensive side of the ball, I don't really have a guy that I would say. Maybe I'll give you one. I'll give you one guy to kind of keep an eye out for on the offensive side of the ball. I think depending on what the health is, because we know Mitchell Evans, Kevin Bauman are gone at tight end this year. Depending on what the health is of Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan, and obviously Cooper's now out for the rest of the playoffs, I think a guy like a James Flanagan could come in and play some minutes. Not necessarily saying he'll be a starter, but I think he could be a key contributor on a tight end room that kind of does needs a little bit of updates there, a little bit of added depth, I should say, to that group. We had a question from Jared. KVA update. Kingston also thought we'd see him in versus Georgia. We did see him, Jared. It was his first game back from injury, obviously, and I didn't expect to see him a ton, but he did play 13 snaps. It was a little bit more on just like obvious pass rush situations for the most part. I expect him to see a little bit more on the second level against Penn State, but I do expect to see him a little bit more energized, and not energized as far as like he didn't want to play, but like he just looks like himself a little bit more, right? He's been on the mend a little bit longer now. I expect to see Kingston and have a little bit more of a higher impact against Penn State, but we did see him against Georgia. And the last one, Raymond Jamond Sports. Be honest with yourself. Will you be satisfied with the season if it ends with a loss to Penn State, or do you need that one last step? I mean, Look, I think satisfied is a really interesting conversation points for the rest of the season. I will not be satisfied if they beat Penn State in its entirety. I think that you kicked the door down with Georgia and now asserted your presence on college football landscape, but you're a better team, in my opinion, than Penn State. So if you end the year losing to a team that I just think that you are better than, that would be a slight disappointing ending, ultimately, right? So need to be Penn State. If you go now to the national championship and you lose a close one to Ohio State, I'm not going to be happy, or Texas even. I'm not going to be happy, but at least they took a nice big step now going into 2025. So I think the word satisfied is a little bit tricky there. I would not be satisfied necessarily if they lose to Penn State, a team that I deem Notre Dame to be the better team then, and more well coached and more battle tested throughout the playoffs so far. Well, I hope you enjoyed the mailbag. We'll be doing this weekly. Make sure you check out everything A to Z Sports. And as always, folks, Ryan Roberts signing off and letting you all know, go Irish.